AC, after, well, 4+ long years, we're entering year 5 of our Hammerland discussions, and we have finally made the decision. We are going to escape from Hammerland, and that starts right now. We're packing our bags. We're getting the hell out of here in a year.
Yeah.
So
it's a slow pack. Do I need this? Do I need? I don't know. We'll roll it up. See if you can fit it in. I could do Carry On. Yeah.
Or Carrion, as the case may be.
Nice.
Thank you. But okay, we're gonna be looking at, we've covered a lot of Hammer films in the last 5 years. We've looked at the branded ones, the non-branded ones, the weird. We're gonna go and kind of like, is there anything else that we should really check out before we bid our farewell? And so this is gonna be kind of a strange year of odd selections. And today, I think, is the perfect marriage of what we've watched before and what we're leaving behind, because we're talking about The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll from 1960, directed by, our MVP of the series, Terence Fisher, and featuring a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes folks whose names we've seen for, the last half decade. It's another Hammer take on a kind of a famous monster story, but done in a pretty unique way. And I was not quite ready for this movie. I'm curious to find out what you thought about it. I'm curious to find out why we're talking about it, why we selected this movie for this series to kick off this series, and talk about everything else. So first of all, how you doing, AC?
I'm doing well, thank you, and I hope your January is treating you well. I've been telling people on my show that like these conversations are what going to get us through the next few rough spots. And so I'm really enjoying the fact that we have community, and I love being a guest on your show. So thanks for having me in. And then with regard to this one, because who knew this was going to turn into a 5-year mission, but it ended up being one. And thank you for being game to continue riding along.
Oh, yeah.
So this film is, as you mentioned, another kind of Hammer take on a classic. It's not a universal classic, because I think it was Paramount that put out Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, starring Frederick March. And but it is a classic tale, and it was time for Hammer to put their stamp on it. And I will say, this is not your run-of-the-mill Jekyll and Hyde story. This is very different, very unique. In fact, both of their Jekyll and Hyde stories, because we had Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, which we did either year 2 or 3. And what this one brings to the table is a very different spin. It's I like the fact that, we have a Dr. Jekyll who is still interested in dissecting the good and the bad in mankind. But there's also some really, I think, unique spins that Hammer and Terry Fisher and Wolf Mankowitz, who wrote the screenplay, all brought to it.
For sure. Now, I'm going to confess something. Aside from Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, and I think the Jekyll and Hyde that we saw in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yes.
I am not really familiar with the story, except that it's about a doctor who experiments with the dual nature of man and ends up bringing out this deep-seated personality who's kind of this murderous lech. That's what I understand of it. But I don't know how closely this story that we're seeing tracks with, the novel or, previous film adaptations. It felt unique to me, but maybe you've watched it and you're like, oh yeah, this is just the same story minus any like bizarre makeup effects or something.
Well, so no, this is actually a kind of a different spin. So if you think about kind of like the big Jekyll and Hydes, there was 1920, John Barrymore. There was 1932, Frederick March. And I think 1941 was Spencer Tracy.
Oh,
and so we had kind of like, those were our 3 big ones. And then we had our actor, Paul Massie. Paul Massie playing the Jekyll and Hyde. What's interesting, if you have ever read the Robert Louis Stevenson novel, it's actually a mystery. We don't know that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person until the end of the book. And so, and what's funny is that it's become kind of
it's Fight Club, essentially. Yeah.
It's become kind of a shorthand now for kind of a split personality. but it's similar to, somebody saying Norman Bates when back in 1960, which is the same year that this movie came out, was Psycho and this movie both came out in the same year. Nobody knew what Norman Bates was. And when Louis Stevenson's novel came out, nobody knew what Jekyll and Hyde was. By the time we got to the film versions of it, everybody did know that shorthand was already in place. So I think what they were looking to do was something different, because what we'd seen was a handsome Dr. Jekyll, a respectable Dr. Jekyll, a clean-shaven Dr. Jekyll, who then would get all bestial and hairy and things like that as when he transformed. And what we see this time is we've got Henry Jekyll with his big beard and, bushy eyebrows. And then that disappears and he becomes a clean shaven, handsome man cad about town. That was something different. It's something I don't think I've seen that anywhere else, where he starts off hairy and goes clean shaven. It usually goes the other way.
Right. But also just the dynamics of the relationships of the people in his life, like his wife, Kitty, his quote unquote best friend, Paul Allen, which is funny because that was Jared Leto's character in American Psycho. And the Edward Hyde in this movie very much reminded me of that kind of a Patrick Bateman sort of like debonair guy who can hang out with the bigwigs and also just strangle someone on a whim.
Yeah.
I was very surprised by this movie, partially because the makeup effects, we're used to seeing Hammer films in either like Frankenstein or Dracula or whatever with some pretty spectacular creature makeup.
Right.
And so I thought there was going to be a big dramatic transformation in this. And it's not. The transformation we see, as you kind of alluded to, is when we meet Henry Jekyll, it looks like a makeup job because it was,
right,
but he's just kind of a tired, haggard old man, like middle-aged man who's been so wrapped up in his work that he's forsaken his wife and like pleasantries and hygiene for, trying to crack this code of humanity. He's like the altruistic version of Dr. Frankenstein. He's Frankenstein before he went too far. But then, as you mentioned, when he transforms into the monster, he becomes more handsome, and it's this great kind of reversal of the expectation. And you've got a best friend he's a degenerate gambler. He's in way over his head, so he kind of comes to the Jekylls as hey, I'm your good friend, but also can you front me some cash to get these people off my back? And he's also having an affair with Kitty, Mrs. Jekyll. And Henry is so wrapped up in his his work that he doesn't quite know, or he's in denial. I honestly don't think that he knows, because when Hyde discovers this affair, he genuinely seems surprised, but almost giddy. Like, this is the id, this is what has come out to play, and now he's got some string to bat around in the form of these two characters whose lives he's about to make miserable by becoming their kind of best friend.
Yeah. So if I'm kind of hearkening back to the earlier versions, we have a Dr. Jekyll who is either happily married or happily betrothed to a kind of a sweet innocent in the form of a wife or fiance. And what Hyde experiments in is going to visit, houses of ill repute. And it's like Jekyll is getting the opportunity to explore his darker side and do things that respectable men would not do, or at least not out in the open. And so usually what you have is two different women who are that he's courting on either side, depending on which persona he is inhabiting at the time. So so we kind of see that in the form of our exotic dancer. And I'm blanking on her name at the moment, but so we see kind of like her. She's like the sexy woman that no respectable man would bring home to meet his mother. But then Kitty is not a very respectable woman either. So you're kind of playing in the darker end of the pool, I think, on both of these.
Yeah, I think the snake charmer lady, her name is Maria, if I'm not mistaken. And that's its own kind of a subplot because Paul, who hangs out in the, Paul, again, played by Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
I saw him on, I watched this movie on YouTube, and the thumbnail, it had Christopher Lee dancing with this lady. So I immediately thought, okay, maybe he's playing Dr. Jekyll or something.
Right.
Like, oh, that's cool. And then this other guy shows up as Dr. Jekyll. I'm like, I have no idea where we're at right now.
Mhm.
Let me come back to this point because I want to get back to the makeup and the surprise of it.
Yeah.
Is there is no monster. The monster is he becomes devilishly handsome, and we get to see the actor underneath all of that makeup as he becomes a hideous creature, which is the exact inverse of what we're used to seeing in all of these kind of monster movies.
Yep.
And it's a brilliant look, and the transformation is all going on inside, and you can see it playing across his face, that struggle. It is kind of funny that, a lot of his transformation is him sitting at a desk and passing out, but it's still interesting to watch.
And yes, I mean, and I think this was something that they didn't go for, which is a little surprising considering, they were going for the full monster effect at this point in Hammer's history, because the showcase usually is the transformation scene. It was certainly the case in the Barrymore version. The March version is an incredible example of transformation on screen because they use filters that would show shadows when they went from a red light to a blue light, and it was all happening in camera. And then Spencer Tracy's version, it was all pretty much acting. Like he would just kind of contort his face, and there was a little bit of makeup, but it wasn't a big deal. But here we don't, like you say, we don't actually get a transformation. He either turns around and comes back. And I remember thinking, like, how ridiculous that a Jekyll could have a beard that would fall off and then grow back. Now, somehow that it made less sense than, somebody who would turn all bestial and ape-like and then revert back to normal. I'm like, well, that makes sense. If you're going to turn into a werewolf, you got to turn back into a normal person. But basically this guy's a werewolf who turns into a human and he goes back into a werewolf. It's all supernatural. I don't know why I had such a problem with it the first time I watched it.
You just put something in my head I don't know if I'll ever be able to get out. I'm thinking of werewolf movies.
Mm-hmm.
When they revert back to their human form, shouldn't they have shed that, or does all the hair go back into their body? And wouldn't that make them all puffy?
Exactly. I mean, you never think, like, is there just a big pile of hair outside the front door, or is it all because when we see them transform, it all pushes out. And so why wouldn't it revert back? And I'm thinking that's what happens for Jekyll, is that he just sucks his beard in and then poof, pops back out. Because how else would it work?
Someone needs to do a fan edit where they show the cut scene of the transformation. These giant chipmunk cheeks or something full of hair.
Where's it go? Who knows?
But getting back to Paul and hanging out in these kind of gambling, like dance bars,
The Sphinx.
The Sphinx, that's right. They have Maria the snake lady who does this exotic dance with this very deadly snake, and Paul, I don't know if I didn't catch if they ever got together or if she has constantly turned him down, because he makes a remark to Edward Hyde, like, oh, don't even bother, she doesn't like anybody, you don't have a chance unless you're paying or something. And then he kind of seduces her with just his brashness and his suave charms, and it comes out that Paul is very much, he's got a big ego, he's very puffed up, but he is very much kind of a chauvinistic loser. Which oddly enough Edward Hyde is able to play up but make work somehow, to the point where he enlists Maria later on, spoilers, in his plot to assassinate Paul and Kitty in quite a spectacular fashion. I was getting strong Halloween 3 Season of the Witch vibes with Paul's demise.
Nice. Yeah. It was we will, I guess we'll get into spoilers. Are we talking spoilers?
Yes.
Okay.
It's 65 years old this year.
We can talk spoilers. So yes, I did have to laugh because we have this great snake dance and I just recently watched Vixen, Russ Meyer's film, where there's a fish dance, which is very similar to the snake dance in that they both end up with the animal in their mouth. And it's like, the animal doesn't want to be there. But unless it does.
It was impressive though when she took the snake into her mouth. At first, I thought she was gonna do something weird like bite its head off, but
Right.
just kind of goes in there and she
Oh.
pops it back out. I'm like, just as the performer, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And she reminded me a little of Tura Satana from Fast
From
and
Dusk Till
Pussycat Kill
Dawn.
Kill.
Oh, I was thinking of From Dusk Till Dawn. That was something satanico. Sorry,
Yes, yes.
but
But
both, yes.
yeah, Tura Satana from Fast and Pussycat, the Maria reminded me of her. Also, can we talk about the Sphinx? Because this is why I was talking about with House of Wax. I was having House of Wax flashbacks because there's so many dancing girls and so many dancing numbers. And as athletic and awesome as they are, with the twirling and the spinning and the kicking, there's so much underwear on display. It's like Bloomer Central. I'm just like, wow. I hope 1960s audiences were happy that they, maybe they'd never seen anything like that before, although they had, because 1953 House of Wax. Anyway, it was, I just was like, okay, we get it, Terry. Those are in fact women's underwear. That's awesome. So glad to see it.
I didn't quite catch on to that. I did notice, I was appreciative of the fact that at a certain point, the movie did stop caring about dance numbers because it felt like after a point, like, oh my gosh, where they're dancing and there's another performance. Yes, I get it.
Yep.
They're in these seedy places. The performers are all talented, but this felt like padding.
Yeah.
It didn't have dance time. It was at runtime. It was dance time. Yeah.
Yep. That's fair. And our actress who plays Kitty is Dawn Adams, and she would show up again in about 10 years. Not the actress from Gilligan's Island.
I was thinking
that's
that was
Dawn Wells.
Dawn Wells. You said Dawn Adams. I immediately thought of Get Smart.
That's a different Dawn Adams. But yes, this Dawn Adams played the Countess in The Vampire Lovers opposite Ingrid Pitt. She's the one who shows up with Ingrid Pitt at the ball in the very beginning.
Wow. Okay.
And so that is she. And as you mentioned, we have Christopher Lee. So we had two Hammer folks. And I don't think Paul Massie ever came back and did anything else with Hammer. But as you said, behind the scenes, we had Jack Asher doing the cinematography. James Needs was our lead editor. John Hollingsworth does our music. Bernard Robinson does our set design. Michael Carreras is the producer. Anthony Nelson Keys is our associate producer. And Terry Fisher is doing our directing. So it really is kind of like putting the all-star team in. And it sounds like you actually enjoyed this one quite a bit.
I did. Did you not?
Well, this one gets kind of a lower ranking from most Hammer fans. And I think because, for my money, it's one of the, it's interesting, the swings that it takes. But I don't think that either the Jekyll or the Hyde performances are very nuanced. It feels like there's Jekyll and there's Hyde, and they play kind of like the same two notes for each one. Whereas the other Jekyll and Hydes that I've seen, there's a wider spectrum of colors that get brought into play.
I guess I can understand that. Now, I haven't seen the others, so I can't speak to those performances, but I really liked what Paul Massie does with his Hyde in particular.
Yeah.
Because he just gets these flashes across his face where it's like he's the id who's come out to play,
Yep.
but then there's also an id inside the id who occasionally just wants to murder people. And he gets this insane look of glee and opportunity on his face. And it's a real danger. And you just don't know what's going to happen next. And that was that unpredictability that honestly kept me on the edge of my seat. I felt like you take the science monster angle out of this and you've almost got a dark side of Cyrano de Bergerac, where you've got someone who's instead of trying to woo someone, he's trying to like destroy people's lives by enlisting his handsome friend to worm his way into that situation. And I was like, I liked the movie, the plot of the husband whose wife was cheating with the best friend, and they had these. I liked that they had plans to run away with each other, but they also kind of hated each other because
Right.
they were just bored and awful people. So I could have watched either of those movies, the monster aspect or the kind of relationship drama. I think they both really worked. Now, having watched almost 5 years of Hammer films, does it fit in? I think it does because it's so
Yeah.
weird, and we've seen other kind of offbeat Hammer films that I was glad that I didn't get what I expected really at all.
Well, they were taking a really big swing, and considering we're only really like 3 years into Hammer's dynasty, we hadn't. I mean, I think this is the same year, 1960s, when we see the return of Van Helsing for Brides of Dracula. So I mean, we're just starting to see the franchise emerge in the Dracula. Frankenstein had had two by now. They did 57 with Curse and 58 with Revenge. But so we were seeing, but this is a big swing. It's something that is we haven't seen before as a Jekyll and Hyde fans. I would say one of the things I think that perhaps didn't go in its favor was that there really aren't any likable characters. Everybody's kind of, I mean, like it's hard to kind of hook into Henry Jekyll. Hyde is charismatic, but obviously the monster. Lee is, dashing, but kind of a jerk and ultimately kind of a pathetic one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I guess it's harder to kind of like go, who's our hero here? Who are we rooting for?
Ernst. We're rooting for Ernst.
Well, Ernst wins, so good job.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing is like I agree, and I like that there are all these kind of despicable characters who are revealed to be bad characters. Because if you look at these, and granted, you're right, this is early on in the Hammer production, so we can't really say, oh, this is cliche for the genre, because they're still
No,
staking
I
thing,
don't
they're
think that's
staking their
true.
claim, right? But you do have the guy who becomes the monster, and he's got a love interest and a best friend, and usually it's they're trying to save him, but really they're trying to screw him over, and
Mhm.
it is what they draw out of him, in terms of what the experiment draws out, and then what their kind of betrayal does to that monster, and kind of deepens his pathos. I think that's what makes it interesting. As far as likable characters, yeah, Jekyll is, again, he's sort of the mirror version of what we will come to know from Dr. Frankenstein, from our,
Mhm.
Peter Cushing, who throughout the series gets more and more demented to the point where he is so irredeemable, it's not even funny. But they're both trying to do the same thing. They're both
Yeah.
trying to find a higher truth within the being of man. And Dr. Jekyll, by plumbing the depths and trying to find the base version of man and the higher version of man and see where that contrast, how they can both live in the same being, that's fascinating to me. I like that he becomes redeemable when it's too late.
Mm.
I think the most impressive transformation for me was at one point he's sitting down writing in his diary, like, okay, I'm getting rid of this guy. I can't allow him to, I'm not taking the serum anymore. And then his hand stops and we
Yeah.
see it trailing off. And then it says, then like Jekyll or Hyde takes over and he's like, I am free of my own will. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no,
Yeah.
we're in
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah. And again, having not seen a lot of Jekyll and Hyde, that is a common refrain in Jekyll and
Damn it.
Hyde movies is that um, Hyde starts to be able to come back without the potion. And
Yeah.
I think that, we're alluding to man's, once you get a taste of something, you keep going back to it and it becomes harder and harder to resist that dark side and that thrill of not being you, not being your normal self.
Yeah, but yes, and as
Yeah.
they say in the biz, um, what biz? But no, I also like that they take this idea of duality and they apply it to the other characters. Not only the easy top level deception of the best friend and the wife are actually the betrayers, but you look at Kitty, she is kind of a high society woman who is also, doing things that are not reputable. And
Right.
at one point, I can't remember the exact context, but she's like, "Oh, I can only be out, with you, Paul, for a few hours, then I have to get back." That's almost a direct callback to when Jekyll is talking about the serum will wear
Right.
off after only a few hours.
Yep.
So it's just a strong attention to detail. I think the dialogue is really on point. There are some
Yeah.
amazing barbs between the characters in this movie. The people that really hate each other, and they're very creative stuff that I think would raise eyebrows even today.
I wrote down a few of my favorites actually. I was like, when the one woman walks off with Hyde after he first makes his appearance at the Sphinx, she says, "Fast little bitch."
Mhm.
They
Yep.
say "bitch" like 4 or 5 times in this movie. I'm like, wow, okay,
I was
1960. I was surprised.
Me too.
And then also a nice cold wife, like that. Like watching that idea dawn on him, I was like, okay, that's pretty good. So what did you think about Paul Massey's kind of because obviously he's using the big facial hair as a cover, and I feel
Mhm.
like they are pretty distinct. If you put the two of them together, you wouldn't necessarily go, oh, there's the same person just with a beard.
And that's honestly, that was part of the mystery for me, is not having any knowledge of this movie going in. I wondered if it was two different actors
Right.
because there is such a difference. Now, again, the beard makeup job, I guess, for the time was pretty good, but
Eh,
watching it now, you're like, yeah.
it's like some 1930s stage makeup. So
Right. I just feel like if they were to remake this movie today, they would have shot all of the Jekyll scenes with an actor with a full-grown real beard
sure.
and
Right.
then
Right.
shaved it off and done the Hyde stuff.
Yeah.
But what I loved is it's not, and this might be true of the other versions of this story, but I like that the personalities and the body language between the two personalities are
Yes.
so dramatically different that
Yep.
you can totally buy that Kitty, who's been married to Jekyll for however many years, and they courted before that. They probably know each other a long time. Paul Allen, who is like a lifelong friend slash backstabber of
Yes.
our Henry. Um, they can meet Hyde and have no idea it's the same person, and you believe it.
Yep. As that is one of the flaws I think of the Spencer Tracy version is that he doesn't look different enough that you're like, that's clearly Dr. Jekyll. But I would say that the Barrymore and the Frederick March versions, they are different enough in terms of their makeup and their just physical appearance. But yes, I thought that was really good, and I like the fact that he even affects a voice. There's and you see him. I think it's a little corny in a kind of like a high school speech theater way, where he puts on the deep voice and then it goes into the normal Hyde register, but it works. Like you watching that wrestling between the two personalities, and it flips back and forth. I'm like, that actually plays better than you think it would.
Yeah, because the voice yeah, there's the Hyde voice and the Jekyll voice, and then there's that third voice, which kind of gets
Yeah.
blended between the two. It's like, I must get back. It's very deep and almost demonic, and you get a flavor for it. I like the dialogue that reveals it before you hear it, where
Mm.
Kitty's like, I hear him stomping around in that lab, and I swear there was another voice, and it was very strange. I'm like, oh, what's that all about?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I let's talk about the demise of Paul and Kitty. Um, eh, Hyde sets up. Jekyll has been out of town on business, or he's been away, and Hyde is kind of hanging out with his new best friends. And at one point, he says, "Oh, Henry's back, and he wants to all of us to get together at the Sphinx later tonight. So put on your best and come meet me there." And he meets up with Paul first. He's like, "Oh yeah, Henry's just in this back room here," and he locks him in the bathroom, and the giant snake is slithering up out of the drain of the sink.
Hmm.
And it cuts away. We don't see what actually happens to him until Kitty goes into that same room later and finds Christopher Lee lying in this horribly contorted, like with a frozen death face, and his hands outstretched, just, and the snake like slithering away from his body. And it's great because I'm thinking, okay, she's gonna fall and the snake's gonna attack her again, thinking of Halloween 3. But she's so distraught that she kind of fumbles her way out onto the balcony, and there's a dance party going on below in this like glass, almost like a greenhouse enclosure. And she falls over the balcony, through the glass onto the dance floor, and
Yeah.
that quick shot of the shitty dummy. I loved it. It was perfect.
It's okay in a Hammer film, not so much in a giallo.
No, but I rewound and watched that like 4 times because I had to see that
See,
impact and
good
like,
times.
oh,
Now, do we think, because I was like, okay, that's clearly a giant boa constrictor or something like an anaconda. It's not poisonous. So do we think that it bit him and that we're supposed to think it's poisonous, or do we think it actually squeezed him to death?
is it not poisonous?
I don't think so.
I
Like
I just
pythons and anacondas and boa constrictors. I mean, that's their method of murder is to wrap around their victims and squeeze them to death.
right. I just didn't know that it looked big. I just didn't know that it looked big enough to be one of those wrap around the body and
I don't think
squeeze
it's
type
I don't
things.
think the larger snakes are poisonous. I could be
Okay.
wrong, and throw it in the comments if I am. Looking at you folks.
Maybe Paul died of fright because he thought it was poisonous.
I would actually buy that. That actually makes me happy.
Which would be perfect because if he died of fright and then she died of distress because she
Yeah.
flipped over the balcony.
Well, okay, so yes. Also, she sees Paul, but I think it's also inferred that Hyde has raped her,
Yeah,
and
that's right. I forgot.
yeah,
I blacked that out.
that's okay.
Um,
But yeah, I think it's inferred, and you go, and there's a part of me, the 2025 part of me, that's like, I mean, nobody deserves that. I don't care if she's been cheating or not.
no.
Nobody deserves that. I was just kind of like, what are we supposed to? Are we supposed to still be thinking Hyde's the bad guy here, or that she had it coming? I wasn't quite sure what the movie was telling me.
Well, I mean, I don't want to insult anybody from the 1960s, but I don't feel like they were necessarily playing on a deeper level with that aspect of it.
Right.
I feel like she just woke up. Did she, because I'm trying to figure out remember the chronology here. She discovered the body right before she fell through the balcony. So she wakes
Yes.
up after having been assaulted. Then she
Right.
discovers the body in the bathroom. Then she stumbles into the balcony and
Yep.
flies over.
Yep.
You know, from the movie standpoint, if I were to give the screenwriter and the filmmakers the benefit of the doubt, I would say that she is an awful person who is the victim of the worst version of her husband who she's been screwing over.
Yep.
And that monster knows it and takes monstrous advantage of her. And if I had to guess, kind of leaves her in a position to find her dead lover's body and imagine that something horrible is going to happen. Either the snake's going to get her, or she'll go insane, or fall off a balcony, or maybe he'll come back later and finish the job. So it's like, I don't know that it's victim blaming or anything like that. I think it's just like two awful people meeting kind of awful ends.
Yeah.
Hyde's comes like a few hours later or a few days later because I love the fake out at the end because
You think he's going to get away with
study
it?
on fire. Yeah. And he even runs out to the police. He's like, yeah, that Jekyll, he's gone crazy. I've narrowly escaped with my life.
Yep. I've only seen this once, maybe twice before. It's one of the Hammer films I've seen the least. So there was a lot of stuff I didn't remember, and so there was plenty of surprises, and I definitely enjoyed it more on this viewing. But yeah, I think it just doesn't get a whole lot. I know it didn't do well back in 1960 when it was released, and it isn't one that people talk about a ton when they're talking about the Hammer classics. One of the reasons why I want to talk about it is that it's one of the few Hammer Gothics that we have not talked about already. And I think that's because it kind of falls lower on the roster for a lot of Hammer fans.
And again, I'm not going to play psychologist with anybody, but I can understand
You
why
can
it
if
would.
you want.
Well, sure. I'll put everybody on the couch. I
Yeah.
got a big couch.
Uh,
If I had to guess, I mean, you're talking about Hammer emergent in the late 50s and the early 60s. As you mentioned, there've been a couple of Dracula movies, a couple of Frankenstein movies, and now you got Jekyll and Hyde.
Yep.
And so people think, oh, this is going to be crazy, another kind of monster movie. It is,
Yep.
but it's all an internal
That's
monster and people doing monstrous things to each other in high society. So it's kind of like an artsy fartsy take on a monster movie.
Yep.
Now, if you're watching this back then, you might go to the theater and be like, "What the hell is this?" Like, people get murdered, but they're strangled, someone gets bit by a snake off screen, and someone falls through a window. Wow, big deal.
Right. Right.
I think that we're talking about this at the perfect moment in my Hammer education for
Yes.
me to really appreciate, having seen all that other wonderful monster stuff, a different kind of monster in this movie. I think I love this movie.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
well, and that's actually when I'm coming back around to it, I'm appreciating it because it is something different. It's not the same Jekyll and Hyde I've seen before. It's not the same Hammer movies I've seen before. It's something else. And it looks beautiful. I mean, Jack Asher's cinematography is terrific. Bernard Robinson's art direction is great. Fisher does, his usual competent job. I think that there's a lot to like about it. But I could see how somebody coming to it as maybe one of their first Hammer films, they might be like, "Oh, well, I thought, Jekyll and Hyde would be something else."
Yeah. Now, would you pair this with Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde? And if so, which do you show first?
I think this would be a great one to pair. What's interesting is that neither one of them are your classic Jekyll and Hyde, so it's like I would probably show this one first because the Sister Hyde's just a little more perverse. And I
Hmm.
think it shows a nice kind of like evolution of what Hammer was trying as they got into the 70s.
Now I want to see this movie, but with Ralph Bates as Dr.
I
Jekyll.
immediately was thinking, I know you love Ralph Bates. So I was like, what would, because Ralph Bates with a big, bunch of crappy paper mache beard and mustache on, that could be something special.
What was the movie we watched? I think it was last year, where he was like the schoolmaster, and there was like the girls on the mountain school.
Lust for a Vampire.
Lust for a Vampire. I feel like you could just put him in that outfit as the Dr. Jekyll character, because he was almost like a Grima Wormtongue, kind of like he had the glasses kind of like hunched over and all
Yeah.
that. But then you have the Ralph Bates of, the Dracula or the vampire movies, where
Right,
he's,
right.
really kind of imposing and standing tall, and I would still buy it. No beard needed.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? Let's see if we can dig Ralph Bates up and be like, hey, I got a deal for you.
We did talk about Psycho. That's a different kind of Bates. Oh, I want to mention something. We're kind of wrapping up here, and I think this is a great way to start the year. But I got to bring my true life into this. It's only the middle of the week when we're recording this, but I described it to a friend of mine. It's as if the Alanis Morissette song "Ironic" came to life and happened all in the course of 1 week.
Mm.
That's how my week has been going.
Have you have rain on your wedding day?
No, but metaphorically, I'm talking.
Okay, good.
Right. But my dryer broke down over the weekend, and so I had like 3 days with no dry clothes. So finally, on Monday, my wife said, "We got to do something about this, because there's a whole lot of other things that are going on personally and like appliance wise. Everything is breaking and falling apart. So we're like, we can control the dryer, i.e., Ian, I need you to find someone who can fix this dryer." So I went to Yelp. I looked up local dryer appliance repair places, and she said, "Do some good research. Find someone who's got some really good ratings. Don't just call the first person you see." Called the first person I saw. Do you know why,
Edward
Aaron?
Hyde. No, what?
No. Hammer Appliance Repair. I shit you not.
And how did they do a good job?
They did a great job. They came
Yay.
out within an hour. They were done in 20 minutes, and they were reasonably priced. This is not a promotion for them,
Go Hammer.
but it's also not a promotion. So yes, Hammer Appliances.
Well done, Hammer Appliances. Are they Chicago, Skokie? Where are they at?
They were really close. The guy was doing a job like when
Great.
I called real close, and he zipped on by.
That's
So,
awesome.
but yes, and I knew I had to tell that anecdote on this show. Whether or not they were good or bad, I would have told that story. I just happened to
Just
luck out.
find out exactly. You also have a working dryer and a good story.
Yes. So I'm going to put my appliance drama aside and just ask you, do you have any final thoughts on the two faces of Dr. Jekyll?
I'm really glad, as you say, that we are doing another year because I wanted to make sure that we got to this one. I think we have a couple more colored gothics that high profile that we didn't get a chance to chat about yet. I thought it was very amusing that Maria kept her snake in a cage with bars. And I was like, that snake is there of its own will. it's you're not keeping it there.
Hey, is that another metaphor for Edward Hyde?
It could be that
Yeah.
snake stays in its cage because it wants to, and it
Yeah.
comes out when it wants to. But
Mhm.
yes, I enjoyed this. I'm glad we got to. Like I said, I hadn't seen this in a while, so it was fun to revisit. And it's always fun watching these, knowing we're going to get to chat about them. I have to say, when I did my own first, introductions to most of these movies, I didn't have really anybody to connect with. I was, basically turning to reference books and things like that. So it's great fun being able to immediately commune with you, having watched these. So the past 5 years, or the past 4 years, have been terrific. I'm looking forward to the fifth.
Well, me too, and I gotta say it's always great having these conversations because I too look forward to discussing them with you, whether or not I like the movie or I'm not so hot on it. I know I'm going to learn something about it and get a new perspective, which sometimes it works and you turn me around on things, and other times I stick to my bitter guns because there's not enough Friday the 13th references in it. But
Which we haven't gotten a single one for this episode.
damn it, we really are charting new territory here in
I mean, this is
2025.
truly a brave new world.
All right. Well, we'll be back in a couple of months because, as we did last year, we're going to do every other month for this. That's not really true. We're recording this at the end of January. It's going to go up early February, so we might be back next month. Who knows? We could do anything.
That's right. This is the internet. It's the Wild West.
Yes.
Speaking
All
of
right.
bitter guns.
So I guess you have anything to promote, AC? Anything you want to talk about?
I mean, we did talk about Psycho, but that's probably because we're going to be talking about Psycho. We're going to be celebrating its 65th anniversary as well over on the Horror 101 with Dr. AC. That'll be in February, because what says Valentine's Day like Psycho?
A boy's best friend is his mother.
It's true.
Wow. Yeah, well, definitely, folks. Check it out.
Just as we're recording this, our best of 2024, we just released our show about that. Me and Chad the Bird and Lucy Ball, my puppet friends, on Streaming and Screaming. And so you can come check out what we thought of 2024, which, spoiler alert, it was an awesome year for horror. And I was really glad to have lived through it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what 2025 has in store.
Real quick, what do you think about Hard Eyes? I know it's coming out in a couple weeks, but have you seen the trailers for that?
I have not. I kind of shy away from trailers these days, so I'm going in cold.
Good, because the more trailers I see of that, because they're at the theaters, so I can't really avoid them.
You can't get away. Yeah.
There's one death in there. In the trailer, I was very surprised they showed it, but I was impressed. I'll just say that much.
All right. Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. Well, thanks, AC. Everybody check out Aaron Christensen's stuff. It'll all be linked down below. Horror 101 with Dr. AC. He's written books. He has a regular YouTube show. He does it all, and he hangs out with me every other month, and actually every month, because we also do Accademia Giallo, which will be coming out soon, talking about more Italian thrillers. So until next time, everybody, if you like this content, please like and subscribe and all that business. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks very much and take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see, but if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.